Petscop is a masterpiece. Your boys at Garalina have done it again. In the game, you take the role of this beautiful boy. Let's just call him Ernest first. As you go around collecting a variety of items such as keys, party hats, and even beloved pets. Oh nice, I caught it. And each pet has a detailed description about them, much like reading an item description from Dark Souls. This game was the precursor to non-linear storytelling. I mean, who cares about Dark Souls, really? So what, you can turn yourself into a headstone, who cares? An amusing thing about Petscop is that it's abnormally rare. The only actual way to find any footage of it is to visit a YouTube channel with the same name. And for some reason, the guy playing it sounds like Psychic Pebbles.
I'm just gonna keep going a bit here. Welcome to Schmucks. The game is apparently unfinished because there's nothing over here.
The visuals give you this nostalgic throwback to games like Spyro the Dragon and Parappa the Rapper. Seriously, to this day, I boot up Spyro just to look at them stunning skyboxes. There's something so humbling about them. The game is just amazing the way it can track you in. Almost like an inescapable...
Okay. Alright.
She's in real trouble because then everything will tumble around her.
So, I haven't been exactly honest with you about this game. As a matter of fact, I've lied to you. Petscop isn't real. It was uploaded onto the Petscop YouTube channel and nowhere else because it doesn't exist. There is no family time-waster game called Petscop. There is no Garalina video game company. Why are the levels unfinished? Who would release a game to the general public before completion? And no, I'm not talking about early access! Petscop is an enigma, and I want to dedicate this video to uncovering and analysing it. The format is presented as a let's play, but as the series progresses, both Paul and ourselves find the game increasingly harder to comprehend. I've left timestamps in the description for each Petscop video, and then an overall conclusion to wrap the series up. And also a disclaimer, as the themes in Petscop are incredibly dark and morbid, this game does a great job at decepting people. And I'd be lying to you if the series was bright colours and cheery music throughout. If this sounds like too much to handle, then feel free to retreat back to the YouTube trending tab. I'm sure there's some absolutely stellar content to be found there. Or if that doesn't interest you, I'm sure PewDiePie has uploaded another 25-minute unedited Battlegrounds video with no face cam. Oh! Oh! I thought I died! What the fuck? Yes!
That's a joke, by the way.
But to the remaining 3% of you, let's begin the breakdown. The first Petscop video was uploaded the 12th of March 2017 with the description, "The game I found." The video begins with your standard PlayStation 1 and Sony boot up start screens. Something of note how the boot up sound for the PlayStation glitches out towards the end. As most PS1 discs at this point, unless seriously protected, would have scratches and marks, causing in-game glitches or effects. And secondly, that glitch could convey a sign of unease or disturbance. Imagine playing a video game, it's 3 in the morning, the only light is coming from your monitor, the only sound is coming from your headphones, and then the game crashes. Silence. We've all experienced this at some point or another, that unease, that tension as you're taken away from the game into a silent, dark room. I could be massively overanalyzing a boot up screen, but still, that's the way I interpreted it. The next splash screen shows Garalina, the company that I assume developed and published Petscop. Again, as I've mentioned before, I'm sure that Garalina is a fictitious company, with any search of the name coming up with links back to Petscop like theories and subreddits. If this is the case, then I have to commend the creator for not only creating a fictional game, but a fictional company to back it. Finally, we arrive at the menu screen for Petscop, and we can see that the game was made in 1997. We're then introduced to our narrator for the series. He never states his actual name, but because he puts his save file name as Paul, that's what we'll refer to him as. Also of note, on the file name screen, we can see the PS1 controller prompts. Select, finish, and go back. But the triangle for go back seems to be quivering, while the other prompts seem fine. I'm unsure if this was intentional or not, but if it is the game telling us to go back? Also, this is a stretch, as I'm unsure if it applies to other countries outside the UK. But over here on the road, signs displayed in a triangle format mean a warning. This is definitely not related to Petscop, but just more food for thought.
Alright, so, this is just to, prove to you that I'm not lying about this game that I found. I'm just gonna walk you through everything that I've seen so far, and obviously it'll be exactly as I described it, because this is it.
It's unclear who Paul is talking to. Originally, I assumed it was his YouTube audience, as he uploaded the series onto his channel with the description, "The game I found." But his use of the pronoun you instead of you guys, I feel like instead of addressing an audience, he's addressing someone personal to him, like a friend. Getting a bit sidetracked, but I'm incredibly happy he never says you guys, because on this platform, that wording is so oversaturated.
I'm glad you guys joined us today.
You guys, I'm doing a live stream.
As you guys can see,
Look what I'm doing for you guys.
For you guys as well.
You guys.
Next, we see the loading screen, which is presented in a somewhat basic but cheery presentation. Note the present box being held up on a pole. This imagery is plastered everywhere in the opening areas of the game, and also has more meaning later on. Past the loading screen, Paul is now in the first area of the game, what we can presume to be named the gift plane. A strange, almost heaven-like realm where white mist shrouds the area. Clouds can be seen in the distance, as well as those presents mentioned prior. A sign states the gift plane is closed indefinitely and all personnel have left. The sign also gives a brief explanation of what the gift plane is: a shelter for over 100 pets. Unfortunately, we have failed to remove all the pets from their homes. 48 pets remain here. We would strongly encourage you to visit our 8 homes and find some friends to take with you. Notice how the numbers of pets remaining and the homes of said pets are marked in red and quiver. Not too dissimilar as the triangle telling us to go back did. So already we've been given our goal in a text box. Nothing really out of the ordinary, and honestly, this text crawl is how a lot of games began their adventures back in the 90s. Paul then travels to the far right of the map, revealing that the game is unfinished. There's no big door or a gate halting our progress until we have a certain amount of items. There's just nothing. So instead, Paul goes inside Even Care, the seemingly only finished level of the game. The entrance, instead of having more white mist, is decorated with trees, grass, and a hedge surrounding the area. Inside Even Care, the misty plains are replaced with vibrant pinks and blues, splashed all over the walls and floors. Each room is also sparsely decorated with desks, tables, and chairs. Even though we're presented with this bright color palette and cheery music, if anything, it makes you feel more uncomfortable, like it's a front for something inconceivably dark. The first item we can interact with is a picture of 2 pets. Tonith, the bird marked in red, and Randis, the flower marked in green. Paul then tries to open a door down the hallway and is told this door is locked. Or not, but you don't know how to open doors. This is most definitely a nod to the fact that Paul's character has oversized feet, but no arms or hands to speak of. From here on in, the messages on the boards get more disturbing, much like any other horror game that builds tension. Another sign states, when you're choosing a pet, find somebody that you like. You don't have to love them right away. Notice how the sign said both pet and somebody in the same sentence. It seems strange that you'd refer to a pet as somebody. The sign adjacent says, don't be discouraged if they run from you. They really do want a home. They're afraid. Show them that there's nothing to be afraid of. The first pet we come across is Amber. Her appearance is this giant grey ball wearing what appears to be a dark green hat.
Look at this fucking fedora, for instance.
And although she seems to be locked up inside a small cell, her expression is one of glee. There's a trophy in front of her cage with an inscription stating, she's a real champ for never leaving her cage. And that trophy seems to hold some merit, as Amber is very reluctant to leave her cage. Firstly, Paul opens her cage, which makes her retreat to the empty cage. Paul then locks himself inside her cage. Amber hops back into the cage, thinking it's empty, and we catch her. Paul was only able to catch Amber by tricking her. Amber thought she could return to the safety of her cage, only for Paul to be waiting inside said cage to catch her. Although this was a puzzle, it was definitely one of deception, and we'll notice this as a reoccurring theme throughout the series. Amber's item description reads, Amber is a young ball. She's afraid to leave home. If her home is good, this is not a problem. She is very heavy, and that makes her life a little harder, as well as yours. What's the safest place you can put her in? You should start thinking about that. Now, I can understand the term homebody is used a lot, somebody who likes to stay at home and is generally unadventurous. But what would bring Amber to classify her home as what appears to be a prison cell? A couple rooms down, Paul finds Ronith, and he goes on to say in the video that as much as he's tried, he's unable to catch him. Something of note is how Ronith looks like a combination of Tonith the bird and Randis the flower. Apart from physical similarities, Ronith is a mix between the names Tonith and Randis. So could Ronith be the child of these two? Personally, I hope not. I've seen enough Flowey Rule 34 to last a lifetime. Unsuccessful in catching Ronith, Paul retreats into another room where we find another pet. Paul demonstrates his past experience with the game and explains how to catch the pet. The last two pets we find in even care are Wavy the rain cloud and Brandis the flower. The two follow each other in some sort of relationship where Wavy has to support Randis with his rainwater. Whenever Paul approaches either one of them, they disappear, so Paul has to drag a rain bucket onto the soil and forces Wavy to put his rainwater inside the bucket, meaning Randis can't get any and shrivels up, so Paul is able to collect the two of them. Paul then returns to the room with Ronith and reads out a note he apparently found with the copy of the game. The note reads, I walked downstairs, and when I got to the bottom, instead of proceeding, I turned the right and became a shadow monster man. Another section of the note displays a date, the 13th of June, 1997. For you, please go down to my website on the sticker and also go to Ronith's room and press start and press down, 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 right. Start. Two quick things to mention. The website on the note is never linked or spoken of again. And the date on the note, the 13th of June 1997, is Friday the 13th. And I'm pretty sure all of you know at this point that that day is associated with bad luck. As soon as Paul enters the code on the note, the music comes to a halt. Everything is still. And watching the series back, I now realize how well of a job the goofy music did in covering the uncomfortable atmosphere of this game. Paul then leaves Even Care the way he came in, but instead of finding himself back onto Gift Plain, we're transported to a dark, murky and gloomy place. It looks like a test room, not too dissimilar from a debug room like for example the one in Fallout 4. But instead of dreary buildings and brown skies, there's nothing. Literally nothing. Only the grass Paul walks on and the darkness that seems to stretch for miles. The only visible light now seems to be emanating from Paul's own character. Now, there's something I didn't even realize until multiple viewings of this video. Watch the loading screen when Paul travels from Even Care to here. Did you see that? Well, I didn't either. Not until you adjust the brightness with some post-editing until you see this. I'm unsure what this is. It looks like a crude drawing of a child, but it's really hard to make out. And it clearly isn't a cheap jump scare because without post-editing, I wouldn't have been able to show you this. This face, if you can even call it that, does have some relevancy, which we'll talk about later on. After a while, Paul finds what looks to be some sort of hatch and comments how he can't open it. And with no way to open the door, Petscop 1 concludes. Petscop 2 was uploaded the 1st of April 2017. The video has no description. The video begins exactly where the first one left off, with the door now randomly opening on its own, accompanied by a collection of beeping sounds. Paul then gives his somewhat confused reaction.
Hey, so, the door opened on its own. I was just in the other room for a couple of minutes, and I came back and the door was open. and I checked the recording, because I was recording, and the door just opens on its own. I didn't do anything.
When Paul enters, the game cuts to black. Loading up the next area, we can see a dark image within the loading screen. Some enhancement, and we can see what appears to be a collection of floating rooms and objects. Nothing too clear to be made out though. He then walks in front of some sort of vibrating machine. It looks like a generator or a furnace, but honestly, I'm not too sure. The model is basic and somewhat featureless, so I'm not sure what to describe it as. Paul then enters the next room and finds some more collectibles. I'm honestly unsure what to label these things, as they're never explicitly given a name. Although they look like an assortment of gems from Spyro the Dragon and rings from Sonic the Hedgehog, I'm gonna call them gifts, as this is a much more fitting name to the overall theme of the game. And some of these items do look like genuine party gifts. Take for example these triangle shaped ones that look like party hats. It's actually quite ironic that these gifts resemble items from other platformers, but if you compare these protagonists against Paul, there's little to no similarities. Paul's colour palette is drab and faded, and the enlarged eyes that most characters have, Paul's are tiny. It really shows what a juxtaposition Petscop originally was, with these bright and cheery environments, while your character is incredibly dreary by design. Paul seems to fit so much better in this underworld area. Maybe this is where he came from. Maybe this is his home. Another thing of note, I found it strange that there are still gifts down here to collect, almost like someone wanted us down here. Or to some extent, this area was to be programmed in the game, but never made it past the development phase, hence why Paul needed a code to get here in the first place. Cheat codes have always been intertwined with developing games, as early cheat codes were used by developers to test their games. Like for example, God Mode or NoClip, so it makes sense as to why Paul would have needed a code to access this seemingly unfinished area. As Paul continues through these rooms, we hear a ringing phone that seems to catch him off guard. The caller states Care left the room, with Care marked in yellow. Paul then notices a bulletin board.
Can you help out with the items on the bulletin board?
Pirates.
Well, I would, but I reckon the wildlife is going to do it all for you, to be honest.
And on the board we see a note with what I assume to be the same child in 3 different states. A, B, and NLM. A seems to be somber and neutral, B appears to be more rugged and worse for wear, and NLM appears to be in shock, covering their face with even the wording in wavy italics. Continuing on, Paul finds a walkway with what seems to be a deep chasm to his right. Traveling through the walkway, we see a large picture posted on the wall. Displayed as a small house painted green. Paul then progresses onwards to find yet another picture. This picture displays a brick building. I'm unsure of what the building is due to the lack of expression on it. Paul then finds a third and final picture showing a windmill. Something to note about these pictures is they were all taken on the same dark grassy plain Paul first found himself in. On top of that, when Paul observes the large brick building, an atmospheric audio cue plays. This cue isn't played when inspecting the other 2 pictures, meaning there's something much more ominous about this building. Further up we see what looks like a road with cars travelling on it. Paul tries to explore either direction of the road. There are gifts he can collect, but they end up being dead ends. Paul then walks through a small opening and the loading screen seems to be showing something. With some enhancement, we can see what appears to be a staircase with a door at the bottom, but also a doorway on the right with what seems to be light emanating from it. This seems to be in reference from the note Paul found in the first Petscop video talking about going to the bottom of the stairs, but instead of proceeding, he turned right and became a shadow monster man. Paul finds himself outside and apologizes for his lack of commentary.
Sorry for not talking very much. I'm a little bewildered, if you want to know the truth. This is a little more than I was expecting to see.
This area looks similar to the first area after leaving Even Care, but this place has rocks, fencing, and what looks like to be a shed. So we can gather that this is some sort of backyard or garden. Furthermore, there's what appears to be a headstone with eyes. The headstone inscription reads, Michael Hammond, 1988 to 1995. Mike was a gift. This would have meant Michael passed away age 7, an incredibly dark topic for such a seemingly light-hearted game. Two things to note is how Michael's name is expressed in pink, and there appears to be a present shape built into the headstone, which reinforces Mike was a gift. This shape worked into the headstone is what we originally saw in the first loading screen and was placed all over the gift plane, further reinforcing the theme of gifts into this game. Paul then comments on Michael's headstone with what I can say the best social commentary to date.
That's a dead kid.
Paul then enters the shed, and along with some gardening tools, we see an oversized daisy that seems to have broken through the floorboards. Paul then interacts with the daisy, causing it to lose a petal each time, sinking it more into the floor, with the screen shifting to a red tone with every few petals pulled. Before Paul can pull the last remaining petals, he leaves the shed. Paul then enters the adjacent door to the shed, and we're greeted with what appears to be NLM. Now, from what I can gather, this is Care, the child who the phone stated earlier left the room. And I also believe that the daisy in the previous room is linked to Care in some way. When Paul yanked the petals from the flower, you heard a high-pitched tone, followed by a low-pitched tone. The low tone is accompanied by the screen shifting to red, so the red colour isn't random or for every petal. It's for every second petal, which means this daisy would work in a similar way to They Love Me or They Love Me Not, a scenario in which you'd pull the leaves off a petal to decide if someone loves you or not, with the final decision being made on the final petal pulled. To conclude, I think NLM is an acronym for Nobody Loves Me, much like when you pull the final petal from a flower and it concludes with They Love Me Not. The final petal makes a low tone and the screen shifts to red, indicating the petal indeed concluded on They Love Me Not. Paul then leaves and returns to the room with Care to see they're now a disconcerted mess. Broken and glitched textures moving around as if they're in a great deal of pain. Paul tries to catch Care like they're any other pet, but he can't seem to as he clips right through them. Something that genuinely caught me off guard about this sequence is how there's no music. No dark, brooding, atmospheric sound effects. There's nothing, just the broken expression on Care's face.
Okay.
Paul then leaves the building and you can really hear in his voice how confused he is.
So when I first came down here, I thought I was just gonna see, like, one room. Like something, but not this.
I really love how Paul conveys his emotion throughout Petscop. This is a game that Paul has most definitely made by himself and placed himself inside to really sell the idea that this game existed. And these subtle moments he has where he's clearly uncomfortable really sells to us how much this game is hitting him. After discovering a secret passage, Paul enters a room decorated with what seems to be children's drawings of a figure. The drawings vary, but it always seems to represent the same overall shape. Eventually, Paul meets the object that these drawings were based off, except instead of coloured blue like in the drawings, it's crimson red. Whether there is actually a blue version of this object is currently unknown. Maybe the person who drew it only had a blue pen available. Paul is then given a prompt to interact with the object, and by doing so is given a text box. The box looks exactly the same as the one in the intro where Paul was entering his file name, albeit the box is red instead of blue and the text is white instead of black. One theory I had is that the colours were opposite, which would point towards this place being some sort of underworld. And although the white and black are opposite colours, red isn't blue's opposite, it's orange, so that theory is shaky at best. The text box simply states ask. So Paul asks it a question, if you can even call it that. Paul asks, what? And the object answers with, I don't know. Notice the poor handwriting of the answer the object gives, much like a child. Paul then chuckles to himself, probably realizing that such a baseless question would give such a dumbfounded answer. Paul looks outside from what looks like a TV screen and we see a windmill, the exact windmill from the picture we found earlier. The object then tells Paul to keep watching the windmill. Paul hesitantly accepts and looks again at the windmill. We then hear two audio cues. Paul then goes on to explain what his plans are for the future of the series.
Alright, so it's been like 2 minutes, and when those sounds were playing, there was nothing happening as far as I could tell, and nothing has happened since. So, I'm just gonna keep going. There's already been stuff that I could dig a little deeper into, and I'm gonna do that, and keep you updated. But also, when you come home next month, and hopefully you're feeling a little more enthusiastic about that now, we can investigate this together, and maybe you'll find stuff that I can't find here.
It feels like Paul is not talking to us, but someone in particular. Almost like these recordings of Petscop were made for someone he personally knows. But nevertheless, this is Paul acknowledging he knows at least one person watches these videos, albeit not a large YouTube audience. Paul could be talking to Rainer, an individual listed in the channel's About section who gave him this gift, which I assume to be the game Petscop, on Christmas 1997 and 2000, and that Rainer had been missing between June 1997 and 2000. Although that wouldn't make much sense, as if Rainer gave Paul the copy of Petscop, surely Rainer would have played it themselves beforehand? Maybe it was a race to see who could uncover more secrets about the game first, but maybe Rainer gave up so left it to Paul to continue the search and give Rainer updates. But this would conflict with the entire Petscop YouTube channel, as these videos were uploaded publicly for the world to see. They weren't unlisted, so why would Paul post these videos publicly but then address the audience like they're one person? Maybe Paul isn't even the one in control of the channel and someone else is pulling the strings. After some extremely narrow walkways, Paul enters in a room with pink furniture. At the end of the room we see a mirror, and beyond that mirror, a copy of ourselves appears on the reflection side. It has the same oversized feet and torso as Paul, but instead of having the same head, it has a menacing drawing of a girl's face instead, with vacant eyes and a frightening smile. This head looks very similar to the one we found in the loading screen when Paul first arrived here. The creature follows Paul's movements perfectly, much like any reflection, but then Paul walks behind a shelf and something changes.
What the fuck?
The creature isn't copying Paul anymore, it's moving sporadically on its own volition. It's still following Paul somewhat, but not exactly. It loses attention and it trails off, only to quickly attempt to correct itself. It seems to have very poor attention, much like a child. A few moments later, the creature corrects its behavior and starts copying Paul's movements perfectly again. It's gone back to a reflection. Also note how the floor says quitter's room backwards, but on the reflected side it says the same thing, only the correct way round. This could indicate we're not in our own reality anymore, but a mirror one. A reality similar to our own, but subtle things are different, or maybe it could signify something much darker. Take for example the mirror room from Silent Hill 3. We see a reflection of the game's protagonist, Heather. On the reflection side, a mass of tendrils leaves the reflection and enters our own side of the mirror, corrupting the room and eventually killing Heather. Are we the innocent person in this dark world, or is our perception skewed and we're the invader without even knowing it? Seems like a loose resemblance to Silent Hill, but come on, this is the only time I'm going to be able to make that comparison. I'll sure as heck take it. Paul then walks to one of the walls and we see a note stuck to it.
This is backwards. It says, do you remember being born?
Paul then leaves and we find ourselves exiting through the same door we entered at the beginning, only now the door is facing away from the camera. And with that, Petscop 2 concludes. Petscop 3 was uploaded the 2nd of April 2017, a day after Petscop 2. In this video, Paul walks past a wall with giant text saying, "Good grief and alas." This quote is very important, as it was also said in the Dr. Zeus book, Daisy Head Maisie. In said book, a girl called Maisie has a daisy flower grow on her head, and she's mocked and bullied for being different. This links back to Care NLM, as NLM, or Nobody Loves Me, is what Maisie said near the end of the book.
Go home. Nobody loves me. Nobody loves me.
Nobody loves me.
Notice how Maisie and Care both show their distress in a similar way. The most morbid thing about this whole premise with Care, it's the opposite ending to the Dr. Seuss book. As with Maisie, the last petal ends with "they love me."
Don't worry, Maisie. They love you!
But in Petscop, the petal ends with "they love me not." It's almost like looking through a mirror. Paul then comes across some sort of shaft and he comes to the conclusion he has to place something inside it.
I think I have to put something there.
A bit more exploring and Paul stumbles across an easel with a canvas on it. Interacting with the canvas, Paul can make a face with many choices of eyes, eyebrows, and noses. Paul inputs random facial features and seems to have triggered something as the room begins to shake violently. When he walks to the door frame, we see that the entire room is moving, almost like an elevator. So we gather that putting specific faces onto the canvas takes Paul to different rooms. Eventually the elevator reaches its destination and we find ourselves in what appears to be a child's bedroom. There appears to be a child, or something shaped like a child, sitting down on the bed. It appears to be rendered into the background itself, so I can safely say it isn't going to get up and jump scare anybody. Paul can't interact with the child, but observes the table and we see an 8-ball and a red truck. Paul then returns to the elevator and enters another random string of faces onto the canvas, taking him to another room. This room doesn't look too dissimilar from the previous one, apart from the obvious change in colour. Paul does this multiple times with nothing much of note, but Paul reckons that these rooms are randomly generated.
It seems like there are many combinations of these faces. So if I were to guess, these rooms are... because there's not much variation between these rooms. They're probably generated in some way. So I'll try a few more. Every time I put in one of these, I have to wait for like 10 minutes. So I'm not going to try too many of them.
Now, I don't know the inner workings of PlayStation 1 hardware, but this extremely lengthy wait would make sense as the PS1 had several hardware limitations. But then again, I don't think consoles back then could randomly generate environments. I could be wrong, but I am making a comparison to Minecraft here. Paul then returns to Michael Hammond's grave and inputs the face seen on his headstone. A text box on the canvas says, "Mike is not inside right now. He is dead. You may visit his room." Inside Michael's room, nothing stands out except on the table. We now see the same red object that Paul was asking questions to in the previous Petscop video. Also of note, there's no child on the bed because, as Paul stated earlier,
that's a dead kid.
Paul then returns to the canvas and inputs the same face that was seen above the door where Care NLM was found. The canvas tells us Care is missing, using the same yellow text for Care that was used when we were told on the phone that Care left the room. So from what we can gather, any colours displayed in text usually signifies a specific person. For example, red for the object near the window, and pink for Michael Hammond. Inside Care's room, we see the same object on the table that was in Michael's room, again resembling the object near the windmill, and much like Michael's room, the bed is empty. At the back of the room is a piece of paper attached to the wall. The note reads, "Your wife says Care isn't growing eyebrows. Note again how Care is marked in yellow. You say that's a puzzle." Also note that this text is green. This isn't the first time we've seen green text. The first instance of this was with Randis the flower. But Randis's text has a black and green gradient, but this text has a white and green gradient. So it's best to assume the person talking on the note and Randis are not one and the same. The note continues saying, "You're secretly very excited to hear this news. You're in the bathtub, thinking about her. I have a guess at which child you'll pick next. When you find her room, the passage to my right will lead to her. She'll appear from the darkness limping, and I'll shoot her in the head." Tiara says young people can be psychologically damaged beyond rebirthing. The name Tiara and beyond rebirthing are marked in purple. This text also has a white gradient to it. Keep in mind we've yet to see or meet anyone called Tiara. The note continues to say, "A young person walks into your school building. They walk in with you. You're holding their hand. They come out crying into their hands because nobody will love them. Not ever again. Nobody loves me. Note that this is marked in yellow, probably said by Care themselves. They wander the New Maker plane. Paul then gives his conclusions on the paper, although it's articulated more like ramblings than anything else.
This note is referring to the player. It's saying you. I was already thinking this, but it seems like it's possible. This game was made, well, this part of the game was made for somebody to see.
Paul then travels to another area and finds it to be totally empty. I find it quite ironic that an unfinished game has a whole secret area to it, only for that area to have unfinished parts as well.
So, okay, I'll just end this here then.
And with that, the third Petscop video concludes. Before we continue, I just want to give my thoughts on the entirety of Petscop and what it means in a greater picture. Petscop seems to be a meta-narrative for most creepypasta stories. Paul has used an interactive media, a let's play format, as a conduit to tell a story that's purposely vague with many branching paths and themes. Not to confuse people, but to let them well build themselves and come to their own conclusions. Paul has given us a puzzle set, but the pieces are missing. With each Petscop episode, more and more pieces are given to us, but some pieces stand out, they don't fit with others. We can't put the pieces together, and probably never will. And in the end, we'll probably have enough pieces to form a conclusion, but it won't be enough to complete the puzzle. We'll have to finish that in our own minds. Petscop 4 was uploaded the 7th of April 2017, 5 days after Petscop 3. This video is a lot shorter than the other parts, clocking in at only 2 minutes. This part feels more like an update from Paul and his findings than making any actual progress into the world he's fallen into.
So if you remember what I was trying to explain yesterday, and failed to explain, I'm just gonna demonstrate that to you now. So I found this yesterday. We're upstairs right now. You just saw me walk up some stairs. What would be exactly below where I'm standing right now? And I worked it out. It's roughly the area where you have the big screen with the windmill. So this I think is a camera. This is roughly where the windmill would be. Why there isn't actually a windmill here, I don't know.
Paul is essentially trying to demonstrate that this camera records this platform, and through the TV in Petscop 2, it appears as a windmill. This part honestly confused me because Paul has never explained this camera and windmill theory before, but he talks like we're completely aware of it. This is most probably to reinforce the idea that Paul recorded these videos for a friend, and if these two were in close contact, Paul supposedly explained this camera and windmill theory to his friend in real life and then demonstrated it again within the game. That, or Paul isn't the one editing and uploading these videos onto the Petscop YouTube channel. There's also something else about this video. I'll play the clip to see if you can pick it up. Take everything around Paul into consideration.
But yeah, I think my understanding is correct. It's just, I'm missing something. Okay, that's it.
Did you see that? Keep an eye on the top right of the screen.
It's just, I'm missing something.
There's clearly something there, watching Paul, but quickly runs back into the darkness when Paul turns around. I have a theory to who this is, which I'll bring up later. And with that, abruptly ends Petscop 4. Petscop 5 was uploaded the 11th of April 2017, 4 days after the previous video. It opens with Paul returning back to the red object found near the windmill, and Paul explains his interactions with it.
Alright, so I spent a while with this, just asking as many questions as I could think of. Mostly like short, 3-word things, and most of the questions that I asked just produced no answer. Or, the default answer, which is, I don't know. Most of them just gave me that, except for 4 of them. And I'm gonna go through each of those 4 now.
Firstly, he asks who is Tiara, supposedly the person mentioned on the note in Petscop 3. The object responds by saying, Petscop kid very smart. He asks a second question. Who am I? The object refers to him as New Maker. Finally, Paul asks where he is. The object responds, Under the Newmaker Plane. Something of note is how Petscop has many ties to the story of Candice Newmaker. If you've watched other videos analysing Petscop, I'm sure you're fully informed about this horrible tale, but to those who aren't, I'll explain, but be warned, this story is true and incredibly sickening. In April 18th, 2000, Candice Tiara Elmore was separated from her family at the age of 5. She was later adopted by Jean Newmaker, changing Candice's name from Candice Tiara Elmore to Candice Elizabeth Newmaker. Candice was allegedly unruly with her adoptive parent, destroying things and fighting other children. She was later diagnosed with reactive attachment disorder. Jean then discovered attachment therapy and experimental therapy in an attempt to reattach Candice to her adoptive mother. She was taken from North Carolina to Colorado, where Jean paid $7,000 for a 2-week course of attachment therapy with Connell Watkins and Julie Ponder. The procedure was meant to simulate a birth. Candice was placed under pillows and sat on by 4 adults, with the simple instructions to free herself. She was asked over and over, "Do you want to be born? Or do you want to die?" Candice would cry out saying she was dying, to which Watkins would respond, "You want to die? Okay then, die. Go ahead. Die right now." Ponder would go on to mock Candice. "Quitter, quitter, 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 quick, she's a quitter." 40 minutes into the procedure, Candice said her very last word. No. Only 70 minutes into the procedure did they free Candice to find out that she was unconscious. Blue on her lips and fingertips and not breathing. Surprisingly, Watkins was unmoved by seeing an unconscious child, going on to say, "Oh, there she is, sleeping in her vomit." Paramedics were able to restore Candice's pulse and she was flown by helicopter to a hospital in Denver. She was declared brain dead the next day due to asphyxia and taken off life support on April 18th, 2000. Both Watkins and Ponder were charged with reckless child abuse, resulting in death, and both received 16-year prison sentences. Jean Newmaker pleaded guilty to neglect and abuse charges and was given a 4-year suspended sentence, after which the charges were expunged from her record. Watkins was paroled in June 2008 under intensive supervision, with restrictions on contact with children or counseling work, having only served 7 of her 16-year sentence. Disgusting to think that someone so neglectful of child safety will at some point be able to even come into contact with a child on the basis to help them. There's an entire transcript of the procedure I'll link down below, but I do have to warn you, it's an incredibly disturbing read. There were other people involved in the procedure called therapeutic foster parents, who were there to help the procedure come to fruition, bringing the total to 5 people involved. 5 people watching a girl suffer and did nothing, and the majority actually contributed to that suffering. The only person who I'd say didn't was Jean Newmaker herself, who left the room. But still, she made no attempt to help this child clearly in agony. But how is this story linked to Petscop? Well, it isn't. Not directly. There isn't a Scooby-Doo episode where we unmask the bad guy after gathering all the clues. But there are subtle references scattered throughout the entire series, which we can point to looking back at that note in Petscop 3. We see Tiara talking about rebirth. Tiara was Candice's original middle name, Candice Tiara Elmore. And rebirthing is the therapy that Candice undergone to hopefully reattach to her adoptive mother. Also, the room with the doppelganger back in Petscop 2 is called Quitter's Room, a name Julie Ponder, one of the therapists, would call Candice over and over. Also, the drawing on the other side of the reflection looks somewhat like a girl, albeit crudely drawn. Could this be in reference to Candice herself? When Paul asked the object who he was, the object replied with Newmaker. And when asked where we are, it answered, under the Newmaker plane. I honestly find it quite hard to believe that Candice Newmaker is referred to in this game, because if you compare the dates, Candice died on the 18th of April 2000, but Petscop was apparently released in 1997, which would mean whoever developed this game would have had to travel in the future, then back into the past. I understand I'm talking like this game is real, which it most likely isn't, but still, that massive plot hole really confuses me. Instead of focusing on Candice, I looked up the meaning for the name Newmaker. One site I found gave its interpretation of the word. Newmaker, an idealist who dreams of living in a harmonious world. People with this name tend to be naturally loyal and compassionate, developing those qualities further can be beneficial. Service is one of your key beliefs. You know that something is only given once it's earned. Eager to learn, your curious and tolerant essence likes progress. Not the biggest fan of secrets. Rather than keep them, you want to unveil them. Perceiving other people's feelings on a deeper level is made possible by your distinctive empathy. This essentially lets you read others like an open book. Your interest in psychology can lift your observational and deduction skills on a completely different level. Now, I couldn't find this on any other site, so unfortunately this might be the case that it's just a bunch of randomly generated nonsense, much like opening a fortune cookie. But nevertheless, the fact the meaning of New Maker is apparently to unveil secrets and an interest in psychology really ties to Paul's character as he uncovers the New Maker plane through a secret code. An interest in psychology ties back to Candice having constant run-ins with people who worked in that field. New Maker could be a title given to people that enter the New Maker plane for the first time. This isn't the first time in media where the protagonist enters an alien world and is proclaimed the chosen one to fix everything. I think this was a purpose design choice, to give subtle references to the New Maker story but not enough to have a conclusion. Petscop isn't about Candice Newmaker. From the way I see it, we're travelling through a broken and unfinished world where very little makes sense.
The flow of time itself is convoluted.
We'll see worlds, stories, fact and fiction intertwine with one another, but it will never be the thing spearheading Petscop. After a while, the object goes from a crimson red to a bright pink that even catches Paul off guard. Paul asks the now pinked object who it is. At first, it seems like the object is broke and can't give answers anymore, until a message appears in block capitals saying, "Turn off PlayStation." Now, if we're working with our theory of colours representing characters in Petscop, the sudden change to pink must mean that Michael Hammond is controlling the object, and he's demanding Paul turns off the console. Paul asks why he should. Then Michael responds with, "Marvin picks up tool. Hurts me when PlayStation on." The poor grammar points towards this is said by a child, and Michael was 7 at the time of his apparent death. So this could genuinely be Michael Hammond we're communicating with. The character Marvin Michael is referencing, I'll talk about him later on. When Paul tries to ask the purple object another question, it changes back to its original crimson red, so our connection with Michael has apparently been severed. When asked, "Who are you?" the object replies with, "Tool," with the shape of itself crudely drawn. So we now know the name of this character, and I can stop referring to it as object because that got really annoying. One thing I noticed going back on this footage, there's a brief moment where Paul's character contorts and glitches out, with what appears to be a semi-transparent liquid hitting the floor. I'm not sure whether this is the game artifacting or done on purpose, but it still really caught me off guard, because up until this point, we've had no real jump scares, and honestly, watching this series on your own, the tension does an amazing job at playing tricks on you. Paul asks Tool one final question. Remember being born? Most likely in reference from the Quitter's Room in Petscop 2. To which Tool replies, "I'm not Tiara." Looking into the video description, we see a collection of questions Paul asks Tool. Some could be seen as very critical, like who is Marvin and who is Care? Sadly, Tool apparently responded to every single one of these questions with "I don't know." One thing of note is, who is Marvin has next to it in brackets, "We asked this one after the video ended." Paul uses the term "we," which points to the fact that there is more than one person running this channel, even though we've heard no one else narrate except Paul himself. And with that, Petscop 5 comes to a close. Petscop 6 was uploaded the 20th of April 2017, 8 days after Petscop 5. The video begins with the windmill accompanied by 2 large booming noises. The video then skips ahead 2 hours and 39 minutes. The blades on the windmill slow down and begin rotating anti-clockwise. A low, ominous tone begins to play. We see a character, not too dissimilar from Paul's, cloaked in shadow. This could be the figure we saw moving behind the windmill in Petscop 4. It would make sense as both of them seem to be in very close proximity of each other. This could even be the Shadow Man the note was referring to all the way back in the first Petscop episode. This figure moves from behind the windmill when we first see it in the video. The dark figure then moves towards the camera, moving it to another direction, and the screen cuts to this image. This image could signify a lot of things. Circles can represent Ouroboros, the dragon eating its own tail, and signifies a loop or something constantly recreating itself. This could mean the Newmaker plane has been here for a while, and the cycle of these strange happenings with the bedrooms, care, and the visual glitches have been repeating themselves. Which would tie back into the tool giving us the title Newmaker. Someone who's came into the Newmaker plane to feed the cycle. I'm fully aware that I'm probably reading into this image way too much, and it could just be a random image to startle you or make you feel uneasy, but that was my interpretation of it. The Shadow Man then asks us, "Where is my house?" The question is formed out of alphabet blocks, which of course are mainly used for children, so just like Michael controlling the pink tool, this could be another child manipulating the situation. Note the green house forming in the background, the same house we saw in the image in Petscop 2. Another question is asked, where is the school? With random props appearing and disappearing seemingly at random. We see the pet Tonith, with him slowly being surrounded in brick. This is the same building that was in the picture in Petscop 2, so we can assume that this building is now some sort of school. The final message from the figure, "I will follow," and again moves the camera now back to facing the windmill, which after an hour and 24 minutes disappears. With only the foundation remaining, much like Petscop 4. As a comedic reprieve, you can clearly hear Paul getting quite annoyed that he has to sift through so much footage.
That's kind of fun, actually. Going through a 4-hour video and noticing that on one half of the video the windmill's going one direction and in the other half it's going in the other direction, and pinpointing where the change occurred, and the fuck is this?
Paul then goes outside to find the camera now red instead of black, almost like it's been tampered with. We then see the collection of alphabet blocks the Shadow Man left behind. And to our surprise, Tonith is still here and we can actually catch them.
Oh my god.
Yeah, remember when this game was all about catching innocent pets? It's a stark reminder of how deep in the rabbit hole we've travelled. And even though the fanfare for collecting the pet is the same cheery and happy tone, I honestly couldn't feel more miserable knowing that the happy overworld of Gift Plane and Even Care couldn't be more unreachable. Opening the menu, we see the description for Tonith. We expect the typical backstory, funny, quirky dialogue, but something's wrong. The description seems to be empty, nothing but a placeholder from developers. Suddenly, actual text starts appearing. A bird. I think I forgot what birds look like. Funny, stupid blob monster, says Mike. That's what it is. Painter. Painting puzzle. This could be referring to placing the faces on the canvas. Catch Randis first. Randis is the flower we caught all the way back in Petscop 1. And although Randis was with Wavy the rain cloud when we first caught him, when entering Even Care, we can see a picture of Tonith and Randis together. A story is placed into the text box explaining how a dog was hit by a car and had to be put down. It seems that anything that enters the Newmaker plane becomes corrupted, as Tonith's description reads more like a child's ramblings than something a sane developer would put in. I don't think this is Randis talking, more possibly the Shadow Man that's manipulated Randis as he seemingly conjured him up out of nowhere. Paul then scrolls down to see 4 new pets. Clearly this is Care A, B, and NLM, but I'm unsure of what, if anything, the final box is meant to represent, as there's no silhouette to work with. Paul also shows a new feature, Book of Baby Names, which doesn't make much sense because we're catching pets. That's the whole idea of Petscop. Why is this tab not called Book of Pet Names? Paul returns back to Tool and asks it, "Where is my house?" in reference to the Shadow Man asking earlier, in which Tool replies, "You'll never go home." Paul asks, "Where is the school?" again in reference to the Shadow Man. Tool retorts, "You can't go back in time," almost mocking Paul for asking such stupid questions. Paul then gives us his conclusion on events.
This game is trying very hard to make it seem like there's an entity in it. Like a ghost. Or an AI trying to communicate with me. But you know, the way you know that there's a ghost in a game trying to communicate with you is if it comes out, if it stops being distant, and it comes out and you can have a real-time back and forth with it. It's very interesting, this game, because you can walk around and something will just happen, you know? Because I created a new file, and I tried to be scientific about it. I went and did all the same things that I did this time, and the same things did not happen. None of the things happened. None of the oddities occurred. So there's a bit of randomness in it, and it's interesting how it doesn't seem to really care if you see everything, I guess.
Paul is convinced the game is trying to break the fourth wall, to trick him into thinking the game is haunted, or has some sort of entity that can break the game's values, just to mess with him. Paul's clearly becoming more and more uncomfortable and trying to justify the reasoning for such a weird idea for a game, where only one level of it was actually finished, yet there's this whole underworld, the New Maker plane, that seems to have all these areas and features developed, some of them even ahead of their time. Take for example the elevator in Petscop 3 that could randomly generate a child's bedroom. And honestly, for the story of Petscop, that wouldn't surprise me. Repeating myself from Petscop 2, why are there gifts down here to collect? To force us to make progress. We're not gonna wander around aimlessly if there's no incentive to do so, especially a world as dimly lit as the New Maker plane. These collectibles were placed at specific key points to give us the prompt to make progress. And would a developer take the time to place all of these if this part of the game was never going to be used? Was this a developer from Garalina going insane? Making a whole level he knew no one would play, programming all of these horrors in for his own amusement? Or could Paul be actually onto something? Something wants us to play this game. At this point, both Paul and we the viewer have been hooked into unraveling the events in this world. And by being fed minuscule amounts of information, our craving for answers has only gotten stronger. I think it's irrelevant at this point whether you believe in the supernatural, but one thing is very clear. Someone or something wanted Paul down here. And with this newfound theory, we end Petscop 6. Petscop 7 was uploaded the 29th of April 2017, 9 days after Petscop 6. We see Paul has returned to the quitter's room. He positions himself in the corner of the room much like a disobedient child. Again, this could be another indirect reference to Candice Newmaker, who was allegedly unruly in her new home. We can then hear Paul fumbling around in the background, possibly going through a script or a collection of notes. And suddenly, a collection of sounds are heard from the left side of the screen.
Something's happening.
Suddenly, the mirror copy from Petscop 2 teleports right in front of Paul, startling him as it begins to mimic his moves again. Paul looks at the backwards piece of paper again to see in bright pink, "Come here," with a zigzag above. Paul then returns to the tool, which is now again bright pink, meaning that Michael is in control. Michael says, "I love you, Newmaker. Please show Marvin where the house is." So we gather from this that the silhouetted figure is Marvin, as this same figure asked Paul, "Where is my house?" I find it quite weird to think that the pink tool, who we assume to be Michael, seems to be now giving instructions to help Marvin. If this is the same Marvin Michael referred to before, then he tried to hurt him, as stated in the previous video. Maybe the pink tool is a collection of thoughts instead of one person, or maybe Marvin is forcing whoever is in control of the tool to do their bidding. Paul hurriedly asks the pink tool his identity, but instead of getting an answer, we get more cryptic instructions. Go there and he'll follow you. His daughter is there. This is in reference to Marvin's last message to Paul. I will follow. Probably from remembering the message in Quitter's room, Paul then finally asks, remember being born. Michael replies with what appears to be maddened ramblings, not even instructions at this point. Also wants 1,000 pieces for machine beyond school basement stairway. These pieces could be inferring to the gifts that Paul has collected throughout the game. Although from what I can gather, Paul only has around 200 of these gifts. Can this amount even be reached? Does the Newmaker plane really stretch so deep that 1,000 gifts can be collected? Paul travels to the room outside the canvas and sees a small hatch. He can't climb in it or directly interact with it, so he attempts to place one of the pets inside. But with every attempt comes up with the prompt, Child Library accepts people. So here we've learned two things. Firstly, that we can actually catch the Cares and place them in this hatch as they are people, and the name of this area is dubbed the Child Library. At the canvas, Paul puts in Care's face, but without any eyebrows, probably in reference to the note he found before. Your wife says Care isn't growing any eyebrows. The room itself doesn't seem to have any important qualities to it, but when Paul goes back to the canvas and inputs the face of Care with Michael's eyebrows, we're taken to a room with an object that Paul himself has censored out in post-editing. You can clearly hear in Paul's voice he's uncomfortable with what he's discovered.
I don't know if this... I can't tell. What's this here? Except it puts this, I don't know, maybe that's just something that it puts in any room.
Paul then produces a note saying we can't explain why the item has been censored, and gives possible items that could be censored in the future. Notice again the pronoun we is used, leading to believe that multiple people run the Petscop channel, not just Paul. So now we're not only questioning the game Petscop, but the YouTube channel that uploaded the videos. This seems to be a rabbit hole that's only getting deeper. And with that being said, Petscop 7 comes to a close. Petscop 8 was uploaded the 9th of May 2017 and is one of the shorter videos, clocking in at just under 4 minutes. The video begins with Paul standing by the road with what appears to be the same blue car moving down it. This is the same road Paul passed in Petscop 2. With every time Paul's standing in the road, the car suddenly stops appearing. Something of note here is Tonith's item description back in Petscop 6 told the story of a dog being hit by a car. Apart from the car itself, there is no direct correlation, but I thought it'd be something interesting to bring up. Eventually, from the dark road, a character appears. The character looks exactly like the silhouette we saw in Petscop 6, leading me to believe that this is the Shadow Man, or Marvin as the pink tool referred to him as. Much like the reflection in Quitter's room, Marvin has the same body as Paul, except instead of a crude drawing for a head, he seems to have some sort of broken texture. Not too dissimilar from the gem-like gifts that Paul collects throughout the game. Going back to the car on the road, I find it weird that Tonith's item description was talking about a car hitting a dog, as I theorized before that Tonith's item description was corrupted by Marvin, as he seems to have conjured him up in Petscop 6. Could this car be the one that hit the dog? And could Marvin be watching this car, remembering that tragic event? If that's the case, this world of the Newmaker plane seems to be a mishmash of people's thoughts and memories. Marvin then dashes away, running up to the pictures from the older Petscop videos, seemingly infatuated by them, circling around them constantly. Paul tries following him, but he flies off into the ceiling. Believing Marvin travelled up onto the Newmaker plane, Paul goes up, but finds nothing. Then we see Paul back where he originally lost contact with Marvin, and he seems to be talking to someone in particular.
Yeah, well the thing is, it's not here now. There's not even a passageway or anything. Can you remember when you saw this? Well, it could have changed between then and 2004. After 2004, my mom had it reportedly. Well, okay. Thanks.
The video ends before Paul finishes his sentence. This sounded like a live conversation. We're unsure who it's with as we never hear the other voice, but the space he gives in between leads us to believe he was conversing with someone else. But he does clearly mention his mum owning Petscop, meaning the game has been in the family for some time.
After 2004, my mom had it reportedly.
It also sounded like they were talking about a secret passage where Marvin was running into before disappearing.
Yeah, well the thing is, it's not here now. There's not even a passageway or anything.
This leads me to believe that there is an item, possibly another picture that Marvin was trying to reach. But because it was blocked off, Marvin's programming caused him to shift away, essentially resetting himself because he couldn't make any progress. Has the game undergone changes in geometry, or is this something as simple as a switch Paul needs to flick to open the passageway? Again, it really makes you think how much detail was put into this part of the game, this part that was never meant to be accessed. And with that new theory, Petscop 8 concludes. Petscop 9 was uploaded the 24th of May 2017. The video begins with what appears to be a demo for the game, going through Even Care, the only officially finished level of the game. The demo Paul goes on the treadmill and starts running on it, changing the numbers. He stays on the number 3 for a while. Where else has the number 3 been of importance? Well, remember when Paul was pulling the petals from that daisy in Petscop 2? He left and returned to the daisy, and there were 3 petals left. It's interesting how the overworld of Even Care is somehow interconnected with the dark underworld of New Maker Plane. This connection will become much more apparent further on in this episode. We return back to the New Maker Plane, and Paul shows us how he can turn his model into a silhouette, much like Marvin from Petscop 7. This correlates with the note that Paul found with his copy of Petscop. When I got to the bottom, instead of proceeding, I turned the right and became a shadow monster man. In his silhouette form, Paul can now see the windmill with the blades turning clockwise, like before Marvin interacted with it. Inside, we see a sign with a new face, a small white tool on the floor, and what appears to be a mishmash of gems and tools with a girl's head on top. Interacting with the white tool removes everything in the windmill except for the sign, and also Paul has 50 items or gifts added to his inventory. One theory I have is that Paul collected the thing that was inside the gears. As you can see near its base, it's comprised of the same items that Paul collects. Leaving the windmill, we can now see the blades are turning anti-clockwise, much like when the Shadow Man emerged from the windmill when we first saw him. The same dull noise now plays, much like when we first saw the Shadow Man, so without a doubt I believe that we have now become the Shadow Man. Paul then returns to the child library and inputs the face he found inside the windmill onto the canvas. The easel gives him the message, "You found her. You may visit her room." Inside the room, we see the exact character Paul is playing, reading a note on the wall, but he runs out the room shortly after you enter. On the table, we see another red tool and a small windmill figure. Another thing of note, the carpet and walls are patterned with gears, possibly referring to the gears inside the windmill. Paul approaches the paper on the wall, and it goes on to say, "You must have guessed, but I was looking through your things. I found that picture of you from 1977, standing in front of that old windmill with you and your friend. You went there, and it was a bad idea. Your friend and the windmill both disappeared into thin air. Her sister was holding the camera. She took another picture. Minutes later, just you. No windmill and no friend. You married her sister, and years later, your friend was reborn as your daughter. Your wife won't admit this is true, but I know it, because I found the evidence. Your friend never returned with you, and the windmill was gone. I went to see it myself. Where is it? What did you do? Raina, New Maker." Some things to note. Firstly, the name Raina is the same person referenced in the About section of the Petscop YouTube channel. So clearly, this person Paul knows has an insert into the world of this game. Also, the term rebirthing is referenced again, going back to the story of Candice Newmaker and the rebirthing therapy. Something peculiar about Paul is how the copy in front of him leaves when he enters. Yet, if you compare the two when they stop interacting with the note and leave, they both move exactly the same. But this would indicate that the character isn't an imposter, but it is Paul themselves. Maybe as we venture deeper into the world, not only is the geometry and physics becoming more broken, but the actual scale of time itself. Either that or the game plotted Paul's movements before he made them. Both theories are ridiculous to say out loud, but Petscop isn't exactly the most logical viewing experience. Leaving the room, we see a loading screen with one of the pieces Paul can collect, the one resembling a party hat. Inside the room, it almost looks like a birthday party waiting to happen, with presents and cake. Strangely enough, the cake in the middle of the room has already had a piece taken from it, with the letter P on top of the cake. Our character's name is Paul, so is this party for us? That, or it's just the number 9, back to front. Probably that. Inside the present on the right, Paul obtains a green key that begins to float above his head. The second present has this strange red, almost pyramid-shaped object rise from it, clearly catching Paul off guard and promptly making him censor it.
What the fuck?
This was one of the items that the note said would be censored, as it is a present with a sticker on it. Paul then finds another present and seems to jump inside of it. This sends him back to the start of the Newmaker plane, only now he can leave and enter back into Even Care. Notice how the symbols in the background and the symbol above the door are one and the same. It's actually really weird being brought back to Even Care because even though the colours are vibrant and the music is cheery, everything we've been through, this now doesn't feel right. It feels wrong, like something sinister can jump out at any point and take control of the game. Paul interacts with the signs much like he did in the first Petscop video, and this sign says, when you're choosing a pet, find one that you like. But before, in the first Petscop video, this sign clearly said, when you're choosing a pet, find somebody that you like. Clearly, we can tell something about Even Care has changed. It's not the same as before. I might be overreading this part, but the fact that the pets have changed from somebody to one, it's almost degrading, like they're being treated as lesser than before. I know originally I complained saying how it's weird that a pet is referred to as somebody, but the game almost trying to rectify itself after we've experienced so much feels nothing short of menacing. Paul then enters the room with the treadmill, now completely empty apart from the treadmill itself. We see him run, showing the numbers increase with pink colours accompanying red. He puts the number on the treadmill to -1 and the game freezes. We're now back inside Newmaker plane. Surely you knew we wouldn't be able to escape this place for long. Paul goes inside the shed with Care NLM and is now able to catch her. But why can Paul catch Care now? What reverted her from this grotesque state back into a crying child? Well, if we refer back to the theory of Daisy Head Maisie and pulling flowers from the petals with they love me and they love me not, this would mean that the numbers on the treadmill show the state of Care, pink being they love me and red being they love me not, meaning that by putting the number onto -1, we're letting Care know they love me. Now, a lot of you are probably wondering, how does that work? The daisy clearly ran out of petals and ended on they love me not. You can't just add a petal onto a stripped flower. Well, if you go into the description of Care NLM, it states that to catch her, you had to lie. But it may not be a lie forever. Meaning that we had to manipulate the treadmill to trick Care into thinking that they were loved just to catch her. Sounds morbid, but if you think about it, this is how you've caught most pets in this game. By trapping and manipulating each one of them, you've managed to add them to your inventory. Maybe, after all, you're the bad guy. Care NLM's description reads, Care NLM escaped from the school's basement and wandered the Newmaker plane for days. You're the Newmaker. You can turn Care NLM into Care A and close the loop. Remember that Care A was the version that seemed the most neutral and balanced out of the three. Also note the box with a symbol on it. This is the same symbol we found in the background of the room with the treadmill on it in Even Care. This leads me to believe that these signs are placed to coordinate Paul where he is in Even Care. The New Maker plane could be some sort of an opposite reality to Even Care. Things don't appear the same in each world, but they link back to each other, and one action in one world will affect the other. Paul then returns to the child library and places Care into the hatch next to the entrance to the elevator. You've decided to leave Care NLM. If you change your mind within 6 months, you can take Care NLM back. What month is it anyway? What year is it? Although he doesn't say anything, Paul seems to regret his action and tries to turn the hatch to see if Care NLM is still there. She's seemingly vanished. Going back into one of the children's rooms, we can see what appears to be Care NLM again. Paul interacts with them, catching them yet again. Even though Paul hasn't said anything, it's apparent he regretted his actions to give Care away. After all, he's the New Maker. He's meant to close the loop, not make it someone else's responsibility. And with that, Petscop 9 ends. Petscop 10 was uploaded the 31st of May 2017 and as of now is the final video in the series. We see that Paul has returned to Even Care. He still has the same ominous green key floating above his head. Paul goes to the area where we found our first pet, Amber. He proceeds to open both the cages for some unknown reason, then tries to backtrack out of Even Care. The game won't let him, however, as the door shuts right in front of him. Paul is unsuccessful in opening it. The game freezes and we're then taken back to the main menu. It seems the game has ejected Paul to the menu or he manually restarted the console. We then see Paul's saves and he's filled up all 3 slots, possibly in an attempt to explore the game to its fullest extent, as he has now gone on to say that the game acts differently with each save. Also note how the top and bottom both say Panic SV possible corruption. Panic saves usually contain diagnostic data that helps the developers figure out what went wrong during a game crash. This would make sense for Paul, except for one level, the entire game is unfinished, so these panic saves would be prevalent in a game with so much missing content. Looking past Petscop, this was probably implemented as a lore-friendly way to viewers like us, to explain how Paul's games are being saved, as he never explicitly shows the game being saved, and the game doesn't seem to have any sort of autosave feature that again, no PS1 game did. We now see that Paul has somehow accessed the opposite side of the quitter's room reflection. We see a block on the bed with the exact same symbol that was seen in Amber's room back in Even Care. Again, solidifying the fact that actions in Even Care or the New Maker plane affect the other. So Paul opening both the cell doors would have allowed him to get into the opposite side of Quitter's room. Paul then travels back to Tool and asks what month it is. A rendered calendar falls from above in front of Tool. It doesn't seem like Paul can interact with it, and then goes on to ask Tool what the year is. The Tool doesn't do anything. Paul finally asks the Tool, where is the windmill? Tool seems to answer, but Paul has censored it, suggesting another item has appeared. The video then abruptly ends. And that's all, folks. I hope you enjoyed. If you expected a big climactic finale, well, fuck you! Petscop is a brilliant example of an alternate reality game. The game has an interactive, networked narrative that uses the real world as a platform and employs transmedia storytelling to deliver a story that may be altered by players' ideas or actions. In Petscop's case, the player is Paul, but it goes on a meta level because we've gathered at this point that most definitely Paul made Petscop and inserted himself into it to help immerse us, the viewer. Also, not to mention the game was essentially built from the ground up just to convey itself to us. This is a masterstroke, and whoever created Petscop has evolved the ARG scene to a whole new level. I've never seen so many conversations and theories spark up from a game since that and that as well. I hope this video was conclusive enough for you all. I know the ending fell a little flat. The series didn't go out with a bang, there was no big reveal, but honestly, That was the point. We weren't this brave hero on an adventure to stop the bad guys. We were this pathetic, drab creature exploring a dark, broken world and trying to make sense of it all. This video took a while to make, and I couldn't have done it without both the Petscop subreddit and the comprehensive Petscop progress document, so please take your time out to check them both respectively. If this video wasn't satisfying enough, I'd implore you to check them out and see if any new findings have surfaced. And of course, go watch the original Petscop series. I'd be interested to see what your conclusions are. And with a rumoured one-to-one playable version being fan-made, the community is only going to grow stronger. Now, to the 1% of you that are still watching this, you're probably wondering why I made this video. It's so far left field. I make videos on Jake Paul and gaming videos, I think. Actually, I haven't done them in quite a while now. The point is, I don't want to keep making the same topic over and over. I mean, I have to do it to some extent anyway, and I'll try and put as much effort as I can into each video, but creatively, I feel so constricted. This video was a passion project. I'm very sure this video isn't going to do well view-wise compared to my more trending videos, and I'm not even sure if it's going to have ads on it, because videos left and right are getting demonetized. I sound like a sentence away from shoving a Patreon logo in your face, but that's not the point. I wanted to make this video to express my gratitude for Petscop and my thanks to you as a viewer. I can't promise the onslaught of trending topic videos will stop, especially when we're in the middle of an adpocalypse, where one naughty word will get your video banned from every known country on the planet. But what I can promise you is that I'm always, at some point or another, going to try something new or something different. If I didn't change my content, I'd still be doing gameplay commentaries, or even worse, MLG. I'm sure this is the point in the video where I'm supposed to tell you I appreciate the support and say you guys in between every single sentence. But I do value yourselves if you've watched this video, let alone made it this far. It gives me the freedom to try new things without being punished for it. To conclude, thank you all for watching. I can't exactly ask you to subscribe because I can't promise more content like this in the future. But we'll just have to see how things play out. Gosh bless, and I'll see you in the next video.
That's a dead kid.
Yeah, no shit, the kid's dead, you fucking idiot.